My name is Major Beth Fletcher. I am 39 years old. I have been a logistics officer in the British Army for 14 years, and on a Monday morning in October, I returned to my base after 3 weeks of compassionate leave following my mother's death and found waiting in my official correspondence a formal disciplinary recommendation bearing my name. A recommendation I had not written, for a soldier I had never met. My mother had died on a Saturday in September. I had been granted compassionate leave immediately and had spent 3 weeks in Yorkshire dealing with the things that need to be dealt with when a parent dies, the arrangements, the paperwork, the particular exhaustion of grief that does not pause for anything. I had not been checking my official correspondence. I had trusted that things would wait. Most things had waited. This had not. Private Amy Tanner, 22 years old, 8 months of service. The disciplinary recommendation detailed a pattern of conduct, insubordination, failure to follow orders, behaviour prejudicial to good order, and recommended her discharge from the army. The recommendation carried a date from 2 weeks into my compassionate leave. It carried my name and my rank and my digital signature. I had not written a word of it. I had not been on base when it was submitted. I had been in Yorkshire arranging my mother's funeral.
Let me tell you what I did in the first hour. I sat at my desk. I read the recommendation 3 times. I did not recognize the language. Not because it was badly written. It was well written, carefully structured, formatted correctly. But 14 years of writing disciplinary documentation has given me a feel for my own style, the way I sequence observations, the particular constructions I use when I am building a formal account of conduct. This was not my style. This was someone who had studied my previous documentation and had produced something that would pass a quick review. It would not pass my review. I opened the digital log for my official correspondence. The recommendation had been submitted from a terminal assigned to my office on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks into my leave, at 14:37. I had been in Yorkshire at 14:37 on that Tuesday. I had signed 2 probate documents at a solicitor's office at 14:30 that afternoon. I had been 40 minutes from that solicitor's office for the previous 3 days. I was not in my office at 14:37. Someone else had been.
The object at the center of everything was the disciplinary recommendation itself. 6 pages, my name on every page, my digital signature on the final one. My digital signature required my login credentials. My credentials were mine. I had not shared them, I had not left them accessible, but I had been on compassionate leave for 3 weeks, 3 weeks during which my office had been used by a temporary administrative officer who had been given access to the space for legitimate purposes. 3 weeks during which my login session had, I discovered when I checked, been accessed from my terminal on 4 separate occasions after I had left the base. My office had been closed and undisturbed during my absence. Doyle had administrative access to the space, but no reason to reboot or restart the terminal. The machine had been left on. The session had remained active on a screen in a locked room for 3 weeks. Someone had my credentials, or had been able to access my logged-in session during those 4 occasions. Someone had sat at my desk and had submitted a recommendation that would discharge a soldier from the Army and had used my name and my authority and my digital signature to do it. I called Brigadier Jane Watkins at 0930. Watkins. She had received the recommendation. It had been flagged for her review as the next stage in the disciplinary process. She had not yet acted on it. Standard procedure was to allow the recommending officer 5 working days to submit supporting documentation before the process advanced. I was within that window. She listened while I told her what I had found, the date of submission, my location on that date, the 4 terminal access occasions, the style discrepancy. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Who else had access to your office during your leave?" I told her, "1 person. a warrant officer named Gerald Doyle, who had been handling administrative overflow from my office while I was away. He had legitimate access to the space. He had not, as far as I knew, had legitimate access to my login credentials. Watkins said, "I am suspending the recommendation pending investigation. Do not speak to Doyle, do not speak to Tanner, do not discuss this with anyone in your unit until I have had this reviewed." She said it in the tone of someone who has understood something and is moving quickly. I want to pause here, because sitting at my desk on a Monday morning, 10 days after burying my mother, and understanding that someone had used my name and my leave as a cover to end a soldier's career is the moment this story became something I had not been prepared to walk into. I had come back to work because being at work was better than being in my flat with the particular silence that follows a death. I had not come back for this. If you have ever returned to something and found that while you were away, the ground had shifted in ways you had not authorized, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what the investigation found about what Private Amy Tanner had witnessed and why Gerald Doyle had needed 3 weeks of my compassionate leave to act is the part that I could not have anticipated. The investigation. Major Diane Nash from the Military Investigations Division arrived on Tuesday morning. She was thorough, and she was fast. She reviewed the terminal access logs, the submission timestamps, Doyle's access record to my office during my leave, and the disciplinary recommendation itself. Within 48 hours, she had established 3 things. First, the 4 terminal access occasions had all been during times when Doyle had been recorded as present in the building. His access card log placed him on the corridor outside my office on each of those 4 occasions. Second, the digital signature on the recommendation had been submitted using a session that had not been properly closed when I left on compassionate leave, a session that had remained technically active on my terminal. Doyens had not needed my password, he had needed access to the terminal while my session was still open. The session had been open for the entire 3 weeks of my leave, due to a failure in the automatic logout protocol. Third, Private Amy Tanner had made an informal report to a colleague 8 days before the recommendation was submitted. The report described seeing Doyle and another officer, Captain Robert Vane, removing equipment from a restricted storage facility at 2140 on a Wednesday evening, equipment that had no business being removed. Tanner had not known what she was reporting. She had thought it was an administrative irregularity. She had mentioned it to her section corporal because it had seemed odd, and she had not known what else to do with it. The mention had reached Doyle within 48 hours. The disciplinary recommendation had been submitted 6 days later. Captain Robert Vane. The investigation turned toward him immediately once Tanner's witness account was established. The equipment removed from the restricted facility was traced. The removal had not been authorized. The destination of the equipment was established through supply chain records. I will not detail what was found beyond what is relevant here. Some of it is still subject to proceedings. What is relevant, Vane and Doyle had been operating a scheme that required the restricted equipment. Vane held the facility access clearance. Doyle had the logistics knowledge to move what was taken without triggering supply chain alerts. They needed each other. The scheme had been running for 7 months. Tanner had accidentally observed a single transfer and had mentioned it to her corporal, not knowing its significance. Doyle had understood that the report already existed in the chain. It was too late to erase it. What he could do was poison the source. A soldier being discharged for misconduct is not a credible witness. Her account would be dismissed as the complaint of someone with a grievance rather than an observation worth investigating. The recommendation was not designed to stop the report existing. It was designed to make Tanner look like the kind of soldier whose reports do not get taken seriously. He had 3 weeks of my compassionate leave. He had used them. Doyle. He was arrested in week 3 of the investigation. He was charged with fraudulent use of a senior officer's credentials, submitting a false official document, and conduct prejudicial to good order and military discipline. The charges related to the equipment scheme were additional and more serious. He pleaded not guilty. The trial lasted 5 weeks. He was convicted on all charges. He is serving 6 years. Vane was charged separately. He pleaded guilty at the first hearing. He is serving 4 years.
Private Amy Tanner. The disciplinary recommendation was formally withdrawn. A notation was added to her file documenting that the recommendation had been submitted fraudulently under a forged digital signature and had no basis in her actual conduct or service record. She had 8 months of clean service, and the recommendation had been suspended before it could advance. Her record shows nothing adverse. I requested to meet her after the investigation concluded. She was 22 years old, and she had spent 3 months believing she was about to be discharged from a career she had chosen deliberately and cared about genuinely. 3 months of a recommendation she had not understood and could not challenge because she had not known what she had done wrong, because she had not done anything wrong. She had seen something at 21:40 on a Wednesday evening and had mentioned it to her section corporal because it had seemed odd. That was all. I told her the recommendation was withdrawn and her record was clean. She said, "I didn't even know what I had reported. I didn't know it mattered." I said, "It mattered enough for someone to spend 3 weeks of my compassionate leave trying to make sure you couldn't report it properly." She sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you came back when you did." I said, "So am I." The login session. The automatic logout protocol failure that had left my session active for 3 weeks was reviewed and corrected. A base-wide audit of terminal session management was conducted. Protocols were updated. The audit found 2 other instances of sessions remaining active beyond the intended timeout period in the previous 12 months. Neither had been exploited. Mine had been exploited because someone had known it was there, because someone had been in that office in my absence and had found an open session and had understood what it gave him. 3 weeks of my grief had been the window.
My mother. I want to say something about her before this story ends. She had been a secondary school teacher for 31 years. She had been precise and warm, and she had spent her career making sure that the children who needed someone to see them were seen. She had not been a dramatic person. She had been an effective one. She had died at 68 from a cancer she had managed with characteristic quietness for 2 years and had told very few people about because she had not wanted to be managed in return. I had spent 3 weeks in Yorkshire dealing with the things that need to be dealt with when a parent dies. I had come back to my desk, and I had found something that needed dealing with. I dealt with it. That is what she would have done. I am certain of that. The disciplinary recommendation is in the evidence archive now. 6 pages. My name, a digital signature that was mine and was not mine, submitted on a Tuesday afternoon at 14:37 while I was in a solicitor's office in Yorkshire signing probate documents. Beside it is the withdrawal notice, and the notation on Amy Tanner's file, and the conviction records for Gerald Doyle and Robert Vane. All of it together tells the story of 3 weeks and what was done inside them and what was undone after. Here is what compassionate leave and a login session taught me. The people who want to use your name choose their moment carefully. They choose the moment when you are furthest from your desk, when you are most unlikely to check your correspondence, when your grief or your distance or your ordinary absence gives them the window they need. What they do not account for is the return, the Monday morning when you come back, when you sit at your desk and you read what has been done in your name, and you call Brigadier Watkins at 0930 and you do not let it stand. My mother had spent 31 years making sure that the children who needed someone to see them were seen. Private Amy Tanner needed someone to see her. I came back on a Monday morning. I saw her. That is the job. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She came back. She read what had been done in her name. She did not let it stand.